Well, hello there. It's really great to see you, and I do hope that you're well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you up here to Weir Yard, and today we're going to be taking a look at a new development in cobalt point motors from DCCConcepts. You might be familiar with the range that's developed from the original cobalt slow-acting point motors through cobalt Omega, and then on to IP analog and IP digital. Well, DCCConcepts have introduced a new version called IP Ultra. This incorporates all of the benefits of the IP analog with a digital point decoder, which gives a whole host of extra functionality. One of the big points of this is that it allows your point motor to be easily switched with different addresses. There's 3 different addresses available from each of the IP Ultra installations. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you can address your point conventionally as you would have done with any other point decoder and use it in a conventional way. But then you've got 2 further addresses that point will respond to, and these can be used by slaving multiple sets of IP Ultras together to give you a 1-button press route selection, which in slightly more complex layouts can be a real boon for routing trains safely first time, every time, say into platforms or into certain roads of your fiddle yard. You know with confidence that you press that button and that's where the train will end up. It also includes some sensor inputs for both magnetic and infrared sensors, and these allow you to also introduce interlocking, which stop trains from being able to overrun a point that's set against it, but also with careful use of magnets set either centrally or to one side or the other of the locomotive. It's possible to have the locomotive actually pick its own route through your layout by changing the points in front of it. But this is beyond the scope of this video. We're just going to give you a short introduction and focus on the installation and also the use of those multiple addresses to set routes. So come with me and I'll talk you through this really actually quite neat product from DCCConcepts and show you that it's not as complicated as perhaps it sounds. As you watch today's video, can I ask a huge favour? If you like what you see, do hit that like button. It does help the channel. And feel free to share this video to social media or even email it to a fellow modeler that you think might benefit from the knowledge that's contained within. Please also consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best way to make sure that you don't miss out on new videos as and when they go up. And you can also find us over on Patreon, and we've got a full merch store down just underneath the video if you want to browse a selection of unique and stylish products. Today's video comes in association with Tramfabriek, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
Points are one of the areas, well, specifically the electronics and the wiring, that have always kind of fazed me. It might come as a little bit of a surprise for you that actually I'm a bit of a techno Luddite. And as you can see from these pictures before I began, underneath Weir Yard is, well, it's an embarrassing mess of wires, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in creating this incomprehensible rat's nest as I've wired up my layout. And over the years, it's been really difficult to fault find, and I think I'm probably guilty of just running a new wire between 2 points when a fault develops simply because I cannot find where the wires go in that mess.
Not a great plan.
And it's really time that I change this. I've also been using solenoid point decoders because, well, that's all I knew when I started getting into model railways. It's what was available quite readily, and it seemed to be the sort of thing that people that I knew at the time would talk about when you wanted to change your points. Had I known about the Cobalt point motors from DCCConcepts, I would have probably embraced them from the start. Because as we go on in this video, you'll see how much easier these are to set up, and it makes for a really pleasant experience fitting all the wiring in. It's neat, it's straightforward, and it's fairly self-explanatory as well. I've actually been able to remove an awful lot of that horrible rat's nest. I've cleared up a number of faults as well, which had defied my fault finding. And all in all, I've got a much better installation for the future underneath Weir Yard. But as we go through today's video, you'll see just how that comes together with the all-new IP Ultra from DCCConcepts. We do have a link down below in the description box that takes you to TMC, where you can find this new product and all of the rest of the DCCConcepts products available to purchase at what we believe to be a very favourable price. But come with me and I'll show you just how easy these are to install and set up, and for you to get the most out of that multiple addressing for getting routing into your platforms or into your yards with a single button press. When I got back into railway modelling, I built my layouts and I looked to being able to control the points remotely. At the time I was a DC only modeller, and I just went with what I already knew, and that was the solenoid point motors that I'd used for years and years and years. And actually they did the job, sort of. They were very noisy and clunky and really quite difficult to get set up and aligned, and no end of aggro with these. I had them in my shed layout, Bolton Trinity Road, and when it came time to build Weir Yard, it was only natural that I would just transfer these over. And in fact, a good deal of the point motors up here on Weir Yard were actually salvaged from that layout as well. Then when I went DCC and decided I really needed a better way of controlling the points and making full use of DCC, I then found these, the DCCConcepts ADS type solenoid decoder, which really did neaten up Weir Yard, got rid of those banks of switches that were dotted about all over the place, and got rid of a big chunk of the wiring runs underneath just by mounting these units close to where there were the points and then wiring them directly in, giving them an accessory address, and you're good to go. But fundamentally, you're still changing these clunky, hard to align, not always fully reliable solenoid motors, and moreover, with the micro switches here glued on top to activate things like the frogs, they really could be a bit of a nuisance. You ended up as well with still a huge rat's nest of wires. And it wasn't until I went to work at DCCConcepts briefly that I then eventually came across their slow-acting point motors. Now, Weir Yard is a layout that does have upgrades done to it from time to time, and looking underneath one day at that massive rat's nest of cabling, I thought, you know what, it's actually time. I want more reliable points that actually work first time, every time, and I want rid of all of that rat's nest of wires. And luckily, right now, DCCConcepts have released an all-new complementary range of slow-acting cobalt point motors called the IP Ultra, and that seemed a perfect jumping-off point to upgrade the points on Weir Yard. So that's exactly what we've done here. DCCConcepts have very kindly sent over 6 of the IP Ultras, and these are quite interesting because they're actually, rather than being based around the IP digital point motors, they're based on the IP analog. And this actually does give them extra functionality over and above the IP digital, coupled with an ADIA accessory decoder for each of the points. This is the perfect opportunity to be able to do a whole bunch of things that you've never actually been able to do with anybody's point motors, let alone the IP digitals. The separate accessory decoder includes 3 programmable accessory addresses. That means that each point can be operated via 3 different addresses. And you might be thinking, well, why would I need to do that? Surely 1 point, 1 address. Well, actually, have a think about it. If you've got routes to set, then quite often you can be changing several points to be able to route a train into, say, a particular platform of a station. You have to remember which accessory controls which point, and which points you need to change to be able to route that train where you want it to go. With 3 different accessory addresses for each point, imagine this. You have a first address, which is for that point on its own. A second address, maybe you want to be able to route a train into a particular platform. Well, then you would program that point and a number of others with that address to be able to route a train at the press of 1 button or the sending of 1 accessory command into that platform. And then you've got a third address which you can use to route a train to a different platform or take a different branching route. 1 button press, 1 accessory command, 1 Cobalt S lever, and you know that your train is going the right way each time without any derailments, without any missed points that would cause all manner of problems. So it gives you a huge amount of flexibility. It also includes an input here for a manual switch, so you can still change your point manually, but you've got all that extra DCC functionality. Coupled with Cobalt IP analog point motors, this actually gives you extra switches so that you can switch not just the frog polarity, but you could switch signals, have them interlocked with the points. Really, there's so many different things that you can do. Each IP Ultra pack includes a point motor and an accessory decoder for every point. And one of the good things about this that I've found already is that you can actually double up on each of the decoders. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you've got a crossover between 2 tracks. Those 2 points are always going to change at the same time. They're never going to need for one to change but not the other. And that means you can be more economical, just buy another pack of IP analogs and double them up. The accessory decoder will quite happily power 2 of these at any one time, and that means that you can make your IP Ultras go a lot further. We've also got inputs for different sensors which will trigger points, so you could have magnetic sensors. Let's say you've got a train approaching a point that's been set against it. You could conceivably create a situation where the train triggers the point to give it the route whenever it comes up to it. The same for infrared sensors, and these are all available as extra accessories that can be added to the system. And this provides for a lot of different automated running options. It really is super flexible. They also come with sticky pads already fitted on the underside, and this means mounting these on the underside of your layout really is super easy. You can also mount them into the recess on the side of your point motors, so it would be perfectly possible to just stick the decoder to the point motor, and then you've got them both in the same place. Or if you want extra accessibility, for example, your point motors are somewhere that's actually a little bit difficult to see, and maybe you want to be able to just be able to change the accessories by setting the learn and run switches really easily. Why not have this somewhere accessible and then the wires just off to the point motors, just to make things a lot easier to set up and deal with. One of the other benefits of using the IP analog is whereas on the IP digitals you have a switch here which is the set and run switch, and if you find that you've got your point changing in the opposite direction from what you want, you've got to go through a process of sending different commands to it to reverse all that, which can be a little bit frustrating for those people who are perhaps not quite so techno savvy. There's just a little switch here. You flick that on and the point will now change in the opposite direction when the command is sent. So imagine we flick the switch down and the point is moving in the wrong way. Change the setting, flick our switch down, and the point will now change the other way without you actually having to work out and send any particular commands to it. We've got the same solder-free attachments here for being able to do the wiring. There's no soldering needed whatsoever, and that extends across the ADIA too. It's just simply a case of pushing these down, feeding the wire right in, and believe me, you need to make sure that you've got plenty of wire in there. It'll take up to anywhere up to about 10 millimeters of wire for a really super connection. And then we've also got very, very handy guide to what each of these connections actually do. So we've got our reversing DC with pins 1 and 2. Those get wired back to the terminal just here on the ADIA. Pin 3 gives you a switched LED feed, and that's good for if you want to, say, have an LED indicator somewhere of which direction your point is set. We've then got on pins 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8 and 9, 2 separate single pole double throw switches. These will allow you to switch, let's say, a electro frog and a signal all from the same switch without needing to add in any extra switching to expand on that control. The area of Weir Yard that I've chosen to add these point motors into is this bit here. You can see that there's a lot of different points all clustered together. If we look underneath the baseboard, well, it really is an utter mess. Look at this football of wiring. I'm not actually really sure where any of these wires go. It means if there's a fault, then it really does take a lot of effort to track it down and to repair it. There just isn't a way of following any of these wires reliably, and I'm just sick and tired of having this mess here. So I'm going to use this opportunity to tidy things up and give myself these slow acting point motors. It's also going to allow me to be able to make full use of that 3 different accessory address setting switches on the ADIA. And I'm going to experiment with these to provide extra routes through here where I press one button and this huge network of points will set itself up first time every time for me to be able to get my trains to just run on through. I think this is going to actually expand on the functionality of Weir Yard. For a long time, I've just not shunted in the sidings because it's been just a complete faff to change the points. I've had sticky points as well, which don't always go over when you flick the switch, and I'm really hoping that this is going to be the solution to all that. You may even see me shunting trains on Weir Yard, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. I've already gone ahead and replaced some of the point motors just to get a feel of what it takes to add these to the layout, and actually it's so much simpler than the solenoid motors that these are replacing. I've tried various different techniques, including mounting the ADIA decoder directly to the point motors, which does make for a really convenient setup. however at the expense of the ease of change of these little switches. So for a lot of this area, my plan is to mount the decoder separately and then just have the pair of wires going off to the point motors. Prepping the point motors for fitting is really easy. Whilst the decoders themselves do already have the sticky pads applied, we're going to need to fit these to the point motors themselves, and it's really easy. Just going to peel off the backing from one side of this pad, make sure it lines up with where the screw holes go, and just gently push that into place. Leave the other side on for now, it just protects the sticky from picking up dust and such like. The motors themselves all come self-centered from the factory, and this does help with the setting up once they've gone in underneath the points. There's an accessory bag for each point, and we've got our throw rod, we've got a fulcrum mount that just slides into here, and on all of these it's usually fairly simple to use the centermost hole. There are a number of others, and if you find that, for example, a baseboard cross member just gets slightly in the way, you can use some of these other holes to change the angle of the throw wire and just to help in sighting of the point motor. But actually, for pretty much all of these, I'm going to stick with the central mount point. Now there's two holes on there. The one at the bottom there is for the fulcrum pin. And then looking through these screws, and this is something I like, they give you spare screws. So if the carpet gods take their fill, you still have enough screws to be able to complete the project. Very carefully screw that in. Don't force it, don't over tighten it, but that now makes sure that that is perfectly in place. And they do give you a lot of extra on this. It will go through a depth of baseboard. If you're fitting these from scratch, you will need to work out and drill a hole for this to go through before you put your points down. But actually, in my case, I've already got those holes because I'm replacing solenoid point motors. These extra screws are kind of a belt and braces approach. Once the sticky pad has allowed you to mount this underneath, a really great addition, I must add, because quite often space is limited and you kind of line it up, feed this through the tie bar hole, and then you can shoom onto the underside of the baseboard, and it just kind of holds itself there, gives you plenty of time to be able to use up to 4 of these screws just to screw it in place. Belt and braces, these sticky pads are actually strong enough to hold the motor all on their own, but it just gives you a bit of extra reassurance. Likewise for the ADIA, there are actually screw holes. Each of these do come with 4 small screws, so you can screw these as well. I find 4 screws is overkill, and I've actually just put 2 screws in, just, for peace of mind. I've gone ahead and I've prepped another IP analog. I'm going to fit these as a pair, just show you how to do that. And what I really like as well about the IP Ultras is they're coming with the wire as well, so it really is a one-stop shop. And this is some really quite high quality copper wire. It's exactly the same as which is sold for droppers. You can see there the black and the red, and they're held together by a kind of plastic webbing, which does help to make your wiring an awful lot neater. And then all you need to do on here is I tend to use a pair of cutters just to separate the webbing, and that just makes it a lot easier to separate enough of this that you can use it a lot easier. And then the bus wire strippers, you're going to need to just strip, again as I said before, about 10 millimeters is a good amount when connecting to the point motors, and that just ensures a really good connection. Just twist that wire like that, and then on the point motors themselves we're looking at the DC in. When we come to set this up under the baseboard, it's It's just simply a case of holding down the spring-loaded catch, lining up and feeding in. You'd see that all 10mm has gone in, and then when we take the pressure off, it really is good and strong. So we've got a really good connection there. But I'm going to connect this up under the baseboard. I'm going to make sure that the point motor is in position first before I start adding in the wire. When it comes to connecting wires to the decoder, we've got screw terminals for the DC switchable power to the point motors, and also for an input switch that allows for manual control of the whole system. Each of these comes with their own accessory bag, and that includes enough screws to screw it in, plus one for the carpet gods. And I do like this as well. We've got a simple plug-in connector for the main power feed. Now these can run either off a separate bus or off your main DCC power bus. And this is a really nice positive connection, again with screw terminals. The fact that you can unplug this makes it a lot easier to put the wires in, and then in a location that might be a little bit harder to access, just plug it in. It also means on fault finding it's possible to unplug each of the points without any great effort if that should prove necessary. Getting everything working is remarkably easy, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start out here showing you it above baseboard. It's just a lot easier to show you this way than when it's underneath the layout. So just connecting this wire to the point motor, making sure that these wires go all the way down, and the other end of this is just screw terminals on the decoder board. And then what I'm going to do is bring in my alpha central and some power from the layout. Got two red lights show us that this is all up and running. At the moment the point motor is set up by default as number 1, number 10 and number 100. Now what I would say is if you're not going to use the second and third addresses, it's worthwhile changing certainly the second one to a number higher than number 10, because number 10 is highly likely to be in use on your layout. So what I'm going to do is just get the small little dip switches already done to set there to run, and actually I'm going to change that to number, let's see now, number 5, and that will learn that as per normal. Once we're happy with that, set that back to run. Just be very careful manipulating these switches. It's easy to break them if you're too heavy-handed. So number 1 I'm going to change to number 4. A couple of times for that to learn that, and then you can imagine that we're going to have this as part of a junction where its actual address will be, let's say, number 5, and you can see that the point motor moves. Number 5 again to go back the other way. If you want to change the direction of movement, it's really easy. Flick that switch, and then when I press number 5, it's already moved that way, so press number 5 for the other way, and you can see that the direction of movement on this point motor is reversed. Let's say now it's part of a route set, so we've got 2, 3, 4 or more of these all set up to form a route, rather than pressing multiple buttons and having to remember which points on which. We've got that second route, and that is now set up for number 4. And that works absolutely fine. And it still reacts to number 5 as well. So I'm quite happy with that. And you can actually bench set up these if you wish, so that you can stick them to the side of the point motor before it goes underneath the baseboard, but I'm actually going to keep this separate. So I'm going to go ahead now and prepare the point. we've got to remove the spring for the self-centering and make the blades just free moving, and then we can go underneath and fit the point motor. Removing the center acting springs on Pico points is really easy but quite necessary. At the moment these kind of just like snap over fairly readily, so what I want to do is just take the spring out. There's a couple of tabs, bend them back, there's a plate that comes out, and then just make sure that we are clear. You can see that the spring has, there we go, it's just dropped free. And then just for purely aesthetic purposes, I'm going to place that back in where it was and just fold down these little tabs just to re-secure it. And then that's now free to move freely. Again, on the next one, we don't want that click and click. This is a slightly different design, so just need to remove the spring and then we're good to go. Filming underneath here is really difficult, so you'll have to excuse the strange angles and the occasional knocks of the camera. First thing I want to do is to add in the point decoders, the ADIAs, and I've already gone ahead and attached these two together. I will still need to run a power feed to them, but it just makes sense at this stage to get this done. Unplug that for ease of use, and I'm just lining them all up along here. You can see, just make sure you don't get any wires stuck underneath. Those sticky pads really are good. I've looped these together for now. I'm going to run another power feed across from there to there in a moment, once I've got everything else lined up. Now the points that I'm going to be putting in, there's one here. Now this was an underboard mounted point motor, so we've just got that small hole, which is absolutely fine. It's also a useful thing to have the point motors both mounted on the same side of the point. These two are going to be changing together, so I'm going to do this one first. So I'm just looking up and making sure that I can get that pin through the tie bar hole, and I haven't taken the sticky pad off yet. I'm just deciding where this needs to go, and that's going to be the best location. And I'm going to just get the peel off and get that fitted. Feed that through. Get that approximately in the center. Line everything up and push that into the pad. And then I'm going to go for the next point motor. Line up the pin. Work out the rough direction that the tie bar throws. Again, that seems alright, so we're going to remove the sticky label through the hole. Just make sure you are through the hole and press into place. And then it's onto the wiring. All I'm going to do is I'm going to set two sets of wires back from here, and that's going to screw into this terminal. Just make sure they're the right way round. If you find that one point is throwing in the opposite direction to what you want, you've got that switch. If both are, flick both switches, and then I can set the address just up here on the decoder. And finally, all of the new wiring is in, and I can now set all of the addresses. You can see here, I've got the primary addresses set. I'm going to set the secondary address to 15 for all of these, and that will provide me with a route through Weir Yard that I can set with just one flick of a switch. Incidentally, Aegis really does come into its own, with the battery pack allowing me to set up all of the addresses under the baseboards without having to continually have to crawl out. With the IP Ultra laid out here, you can see the 3 different switches which give you 3 different addresses. Why might you want this? Well, let's say the point has its primary address, just as before. This is the conventional way of setting up a point, and that allows you to change the point all on its own. But you then have 2 further addresses, which allow the point to be addressed in a combination of other points. So you've got effectively, singly, and 2 other routes in conjunction with other IP Ultras, which allow you to route trains in a single button press to, say, different platforms of a station. So I've finally got all the IP Ultras set up, and I've made use of the multiple addresses to be able to set routes. WearYard doesn't necessarily give you the best opportunities for this, but certainly in this area it's going to go a long way to opening up this to the joys of being able to shunt trains. Previously, whilst using the solenoid point motors, you had to remember a whole sequence of button presses with a channel for every single point. And there was no opportunity to slave a lot of these together to give you routes, so it became quite a laborious chore. The IP Ultras have taken all of that problem away, and so you can see here on the right hand screen we're going to start off, and I'm going to do a button press for changing the points, and you can see them go. And that's operating that set of points all on their own. So that's using the first address in the 3 address sequence. And then we can shunt the locomotive through. As you can see, it's only concerned with this set of points. And we can change it back again and shunt back through to the engine shed area. And this actually just makes things a lot easier. And the IP Ultra gives you all of the different switching options, which I've used here to be able to switch things like the electrofrogs. So everything is taken care of in one easy to use module. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at the other set of points. So we're going to go over to those. And these are controlled by a different set of addresses. So at the moment, the IP Ultra, this is using the first address of the 3. So we turn our focus over to the left-hand screen, and this is another set of points that are wired to the IP Ultras. Initially, I'm going to use the first address on this, and this is what you could regard as being the conventional address for the point, the one that if you were using any other type of point motors, this is the address that it would be changed on. So you can see here that we can change that address, just that point's working. Over on the right hand screen there's no change to those points, and we can bring the train through here and again shunt as per normal. So this is a much more conventional use of the IP Ultra as an ordinary point decoder. You can bring the train back again. And then when that's through, again, we can change that point all on its own. And change that again. Now this is where the party trick of IP Ultra comes in. What we've got here is I'm using the second address on both of these point motors. The IP Ultra is set in both cases with that secondary address to the same address number. Now I've chosen number 3 on this, but you can choose any address that you want that isn't already in use with any other points. And this doesn't affect those first 2 that we used. It's quite simply a case of this is an auxiliary address that allows both sets of points to switch at the same time. So when we press that, you can see there that everything switches as one. So there's a single button press for that entire route. And there isn't actually really any kind of limit to this, as long as you've got the power supply to be able to operate multiple points at the same time. You could slave together quite a few different points to be able to change them all together for setting a route. This is particularly useful if, say, you're wanting to run trains into a station. Let's say you've got 3 parallel tracks going into the station with a ladder crossing. So 3 sets of crossovers in turn, connecting tracks 1 to track 2 and then track 2 to track 3. You can see in this way that we're able to route trains from track 1 to arrive in any of platforms 1, 2 or 3 with a single button press. And that means that as you expand this, you've got 3 addresses with each point motor to play with. You can add them together in different combinations, and a single button press will route a train into the desired platform without having to remember to switch a multitude of switches. Well, I hope you found today's video informative, and certainly from my point of view I'd like to thank DCCConcepts, who sent over a couple of examples of the IP Ultras for me to be able to have a play with. And it was probably quite an ambitious thing because I am a complete techno Luddite. I really do struggle with electrics, and as you could see from that football of a mess of a rat's nest underneath Weir Yard, I've not been very good at it in the past. It's the bit that you don't often see of Weir Yard, so you might not have been aware just how atrocious it was under there. But the IP Ultras have really made things come together. I did buy a few other point motors as well from DCCConcepts, the IP analogs, and you can actually slave these with the IP Ultras to make them go a lot further. Say if you've got a crossover that you want both points to always change at the same time. And I also had a couple of IP digitals that I'd been putting off installing for, well, I think in one case over 18 months, but I'm really glad now that I've got that put in there. But if you really did enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget that we've got that link down below to TMC to help you find the products featured in today's video. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Does the underside of your layout resemble that rat's nest, and have you been putting off tackling it for quite some time? Or maybe you were starting out on your layout building journey and you like the look of what you've seen for actually making it neat, tidy and effective first time every time. Well, do leave a comment down below. It's really great to hear from you. And please, please let me know that I'm not alone in being absolute garbage when it comes to wiring. But these IP Ultras, and certainly as well the IP analogs and the IP digitals, have really made things quite easy. One of the things I did find with them is that when you're setting up a point and you're getting the spring-loaded pin to go up through the tie bar, with solenoids that can often be a laborious and horrible process to get it so that the point actually switches both ways without sticking. With the slow-acting cobalt motors, I actually found that every single one worked first time every time, and I really do like that sticky pad as well, that allows you to just thump the point motor onto the underside of the baseboard, and there's no messing about trying to line up screw holes and get everything drilled and something invariably moves between measuring and fixing. None of those problems came up with the IP Ultras and the IP digitals and analogs that I used as well. So I'm really, really pleased that I've discovered these, and all I'll say is, Richard Brighton over at DCCConcepts, why didn't you take me aside years ago, beat my head against a table and say stop buying solenoids because this is the point motor that will make your life easier. But until next time, you guys take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.